Hey guys, in this video we're going to talk about our classification categories that you probably have learned before, and we're also going to talk about dichotomous keys and how to use dichotomous keys. Okay, so first to begin with, our 8 major classes of categories of classification. Okay, so when we are working to identify an organism, it has a series of names in order to classify it. Why do we classify? So number one, we can give it a name. Number two, so we can figure out how it might be related to other organisms and so forth. So scientists are always working to classify organisms. Now, the science of classifying organisms, the science of putting organisms into groups, plants and animals into groups and giving them names, is called taxonomy. Okay, so I'll just write this over here to the side here. Let me get a good color. Okay, so, oops, that's not very good. Let's try that again. Taxonomy. Okay. All right, so taxonomy. So taxonomy is the science of classifying organisms. So you've seen this before. Okay, our largest group, our most broad group, is the kingdom. Okay. Kingdom, plant kingdom, animal kingdom. We'll look at here in just a second the bacteria kingdoms, the protist kingdom, the fungus kingdom, and so forth. Okay, so kingdom, it's our most broad category. Now, as we move down in our classifications, then the category gets more and more narrow till you get to the very bottom classification, which is species, which is the most specific. Okay, so kingdom, you know, for example, lots of things are in the animal kingdom. Everything from an insect, okay, a worm, even corals are in the animal kingdom, all the way up to us. We're also in the animal kingdom. So that's a pretty broad category. When you get all the way down to genus and species, that goes all the way down to where we're talking about monkeys and apes, and then ultimately us. Okay, so we're real broad, getting to real specific. So kingdom, and then phylum, class, order, family, genus, and species. And you've come up with, in the past, mnemonic devices to help you remember those. This one over here to the side, dear King Philip came over for a good soup. You may have something different to help you remember those, but that little mnemonic device right here helps you to remember kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species. And again, kingdom up here at the top being the most broad, species down here at the bottom being the most specific. Okay, so as you move through the categories, you get more and more specific. And as the groups, as you get more and more specific, the groups, you also start to find more and more similarities, obviously. Like I said, in kingdom, you know, there's not very many similarities between us and insects. But as you continue to move down those classification groups, the organisms and the plant, the organisms, the animals start to get more and more specific until you finally get into the, you know, the mammal group and so forth, until you get all the way to humans. All right. So we have the, let's see here, we have the major kingdoms. Here are the 6 major kingdoms. The 2 bacteria kingdoms. You won't have to know this on the test or anything, but there are 2 major bacteria kingdoms. There's the fungi kingdom, protist kingdom, plant kingdom, and an animal kingdom. All right. Now, moving on. So, classification. We classify organisms in order to be able to identify them, in order that we know their characteristics and similarities and so forth. But once we've got organisms classified, we need to be able to go back and identify them. So scientists, they classify them, they give these organisms a name, but there are so many plants and animals and other organisms out there, you know, millions and billions. It's hard to know, especially when the organisms are similar, which is one organism compared to another organism. So whenever we're trying to identify an organism, and we have a broad range of organisms to identify, we use this thing we call a dichotomous key. Right here, dichotomous key. Okay, dichotomous key. And it is a way, it's a tool that we use to identify a plant, to identify an animal. If you were out in the forest and you rubbed up against a plant, you know, that was on the ground, and you're worried, is that, you know, poison ivy? Am I going to get poison ivy? and you may not know what poison ivy looks like, and poison ivy looks very similar to lots of other plants, then you could pull out a dichotomous key and you could use the characteristics and the features of that plant to identify it. Okay, so dichotomous keys right here are used to identify or distinguish one type of organism from another. Okay, and dichotomous keys are set up in these sets of descriptions, and they help you to identify those. So let's go look through these and give you a better, more understanding by using an example. Okay, so here we're just going to use shoes. Okay, real simple example, shoes. Okay. And we're trying to identify the name of this shoe right here. Okay, I want to know what this shoe is called. What's his name? Okay, so you can very easily insert a series of plants into this picture, or a series of different animals into this picture, and you don't know what these animals are, or you don't know what these plants are, and you need to identify them. We're just going to use shoes because it's an even more simple example. So this guy right here, we want to identify. Now, dichotomous key gives you a set of descriptions. Okay, so as you can see in this first description, you have an A and you have a B. Okay, and you're going to use the characteristics of this shoe in order to identify the organism. So for example, A says the shoe covers the toes completely, or B says the shoe does not cover the toes completely. Okay, so I'm looking at this shoe again right here, and I can see that the toes are covered completely. So I'm going to use this right here, this first descriptor. Now, all I have to do is follow the directions, and the descriptor says, okay, this shoe covers the toes completely. You need to go to step 2. Okay, go to step 2. So I would go to step 2. Now, if it did not cover the toes completely, maybe I'm looking at the high-heeled shoe there, for example, then I would go to step 3. But again, I'm still trying to identify that first one, so I'm going to go to step 2. All right. So let's just go to step 2. So step 2, this shoe is black and white, or this shoe has color. Okay, so again, I'm still trying to identify this shoe right here. A says this shoe is black and white, or B says this shoe has color. Okay, now this shoe is black and white, obviously. If this shoe did have color, then the name would be right there. Okay, but the shoe does not have color. It is black and white, so we follow the descriptions, and it says we need to go to step 4. So again, we're just going to follow the steps, and we're going to go to step 4. I'm going to skip over some of these because we're using our key here. Okay, so here we are at step 4. All right, so step 4. This shoe covers the ankle. This shoe does not cover the ankle. Okay. Well, I can see that right here, this shoe is a high top. This shoe is going to cover the ankle. Okay. This shoe is going to cover the ankle. So this shoe is called, I guess that would be Kaiser. Okay. So this is Shoe Kaiser. So that is the name of this shoe. So you can see how we went through the steps and used our descriptors in order to identify. Now, I'm going to back up here a second. Okay, I'm going to back up and go over another example. Now you'll see that my first set of descriptors are really broad. They're very non-specific. Okay, so we want to start dividing our categories just by, here's one category, here's another category. And we use very broad descriptions when we're first starting out. But as we go through the steps, our descriptions get more and more specific. Okay, to help identify that particular organism, in this case the shoes. So you can see here, if I'm looking at this, the shoe either covers the toe or it does not cover the toe. That's a pretty broad description. Okay, it's not talking about the color, it's not talking about the individual laces. It's a pretty broad description. Covers the toe or doesn't. Okay, and that divides us ultimately into 2 groups, because this one covers the toe, this one covers the toe, this one covers the toe, and then obviously these 2 do not. So it divides our group into half, and we're going to continue to divide our groups in half until we get to the individual shoe. Okay. Now, it's also important to note that I do not have to necessarily use one characteristic. I could have easily, in this case, instead of talking about covering the toe or not covering the toe, I could have used color. I could have said the shoe is red or the shoe is not red. Okay, that would again divided my group into 2 groups. Okay, another thing, I could have said, this shoe has laces or this shoe does not have laces. Okay, if I use that example, this shoe right here has laces. Okay, this shoe has laces. These three do not. Okay, so that's another. So the descriptions, again, you can pick and choose what descriptions you want to use, but you're trying to divide the group into half. Okay, so let's go through another example for this. All right, so, and then we'll be done. All right, so let's identify, how about we identify this sandal here, okay? So we're going to identify this sandal. So the shoe completely covers the toe or it does not cover the toes. Well, this shoe right here does not cover the toes, so we're going to go to step number 3, okay? So we go to step 3. All right, so this shoe right here is flat, or the shoe is not flat. Well, we were talking about this one right here. It is flat, so this is shoe march. So that's the name of the shoe. Okay, so you can see how we start off real broad, we get more specific. This is a pretty simple dichotomous key. Dichotomous keys can get much more complex, especially depending upon the number of organisms that you have to identify. The greater number of the organisms, the more complex that dichotomous key, and the more steps it's going to have in order to identify those organisms. All right, so obviously if you need to go back and rewind, please do so, and hopefully this helps you out. Let me know if you have any questions.